Halloween night, a night of fun, candy, and costumes. But for the children of Havenville, it was a night of terror. A mysterious killer, known only as the Skull Mask Killer, was on the loose. He wore a skull-shaped mask that hid his face, and he carried a sharp knife. The Skull Mask Killer had been killing children on Halloween night for years. The police had no leads, and the people of Havenville were terrified. This year, the Skull Mask Killer was planning his most ambitious attack yet. He was going to kill the town's children at the annual Halloween festival. The festival was held in a large park in the center of town. There would be games, rides, and food. And of course, there would be lots of children. The Skull Mask Killer arrived at the festival early. He blended in with the crowd, wearing a black costume and a skull mask. He watched the children playing, laughing, and having fun. He smiled to himself. He was about to make this the scariest Halloween night of their lives. The Skull Mask Killer waited until the festival was in full swing. Then he made his move. He grabbed a young girl by the arm and dragged her away from the crowd. He took her to a secluded part of the park and held his knife to her throat. "If you scream," he whispered, "I'll kill you." The girl whimpered in fear. "Now," the Skull Mask Killer said, "tell me where your friends are." The girl pointed to a group of children playing nearby. The Skull Mask Killer smiled. He released the girl and walked over to the group of children. "Hello?" he said. "I'm looking for my dog. Have you seen him?" The children shook their heads. "Well," the Skull Mask Killer said, "maybe you can help me look for him?" He led the children away from the festival and into the woods. The children walked through the woods, following the Skull Mask Killer. They were starting to get scared. "Where are we going?" one of the children asked. "We're just going to look for my dog," the Skull Mask Killer said. "But it's getting dark," another child said. "Don't worry," the Skull Mask Killer said. "We'll be back soon." The children continued to follow the Skull Mask Killer deeper and deeper into the woods. Finally, they came to a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a large tree. "This is where my dog ran off to," the Skull Mask Killer said. "I'll wait here while you go look for him." The children hesitated. They were scared, but they didn't want to leave the Skull Mask Killer alone. "Go on," the Skull Mask Killer said. "I'll be fine." The children reluctantly walked into the clearing. They spread out and started to search for the Skull Mask Killer's dog. The Skull Mask Killer watched them go. He smiled to himself. He had them right where he wanted them. He pulled out his knife and waited. One by one, the children disappeared into the woods. The Skull Mask Killer followed them, killing them one by one. He was like a ghost in the woods, silently stalking his victims. The children screamed and ran, but it was no use. The Skull Mask Killer was too fast. By the end of the night, the Skull Mask Killer had killed all of the children. The next morning, the people of Havenville woke up to a nightmare. The news of the Skull Mask Killer's massacre was all over town. The police searched the woods, but they couldn't find the Skull Mask Killer. He had vanished without a trace. The people of Havenville lived in fear for the rest of the year. They knew that the Skull Mask Killer was still out there somewhere, and they knew that he would be back. The Skull Mask Killer never struck again, but the people of Havenville never forgot him. On every Halloween night, the children of Havenville stay inside. They know that it's not safe to go out on Halloween night. The Skull Mask Killer may be gone, but his legend lives on.